Hello everyone, welcome to this video of why you really smoke. Many people believe that many smoking issues are related to nicotine addiction, but that's actually not all of it. There's more to this. It can be a habit, a coping skill, or an addiction. I will be expanding a little bit more throughout the video on this. In clinical practice, we actually have more insight into what compartmentalizes to which when it comes to smoking. First of all, smoking has benefits. Ha! Didn't expect that, right? Even though these are maladaptive, they're there, they exist. So smoking is actually a stimulant. So that means that it suppresses appetite. Depending on your weight goals or anything that you're doing with fitness, so it may contribute depending on your physiology and your genetics on how it contributes to you controlling anger. Also, most smokers smoke while doing what's called diaphragmatic breathing. Many are not aware of this, but diaphragmatic breathing does activate what's called more of the parasympathetic nervous system, feeling calm, chill, more relaxed, and more present. This is because the stomach expands outwards as you inhale. So many smokers smoke this way. However, this is also a stimulant, so at the end of the day, it's all in exchange for more anxiety in the long run. And anxiety at its core means that I don't feel in control of the present, which causes a predisposition to worry, to fear eventually. So when people feel this lack of self-control, they turn to something that brings immediate relief, like smoking, while usually not knowing that anxiety is actually being exacerbated throughout the smoking, which anxiety is what they're trying to control in the first place. So let's talk about what cognitive hypnotherapy actually targets when it comes to smoking. Most traditional methods concentrate on the nicotine only. Nicotine has its pros and it has its cons. So let's go over the pros really quick. So we have reduced hunger signals, slight increase in RMR, resting metabolic rate. This makes sense because it's a stimulant. Delayed stomach emptying in some cases, and a dopamine release that can substitute for the effects of food or the reward of food. So now let's go over the cons. Addiction and loss of control. Nicotine creates powerful loops of dopamine that make quitting difficult. Second one, increased anxiety over time. Smoking sends you to a small sense of relief, but the anxiety actually exacerbates over time. Number three, cardiovascular damage. You're at higher risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, and high blood pressure, among other conditions. Four, lung disease. Major cause of chronic bronchitis, emphysema, and COPD. Number five, increased risk of cancer, linked to lung, throat, mouth, bladder, pancreatic, and other cancers. Number six, reduced physical performance, decreased lung capacity, endurance, and oxygen delivery. Number seven, premature aging, skin damage, wrinkles, and reduced collagen from poor blood flow. Number eight, sexual and hormonal problems can contribute to erectile dysfunction and hormonal disruption. Number nine, increased risk of depression. Long-term nicotine dependence destabilizes mood regulation. 10. Financial costs. Thousands of dollars spent on cigarettes over time. Cognitive hypnotherapy focuses on subconscious patterns. These patterns can be a habit, it can be a coping skill, and an addiction. A habit is usually just an automatic thought, whereas a coping skill is a deviation from unwanted behavior or unwanted activity or unwanted content in general that you're not wanting to experience. So not wanting to experience emotions, thoughts, or a certain behavior from yourself or someone else. And then we have the addiction. The addiction is when the impulse is so strong that it feels like something else is driving the vehicle other than you. It feels like you're no longer in control and it is now in control of you. So some examples of smoking habit are smoking while driving, smoking after meals, smoking with coffee, smoking during breaks. So it's kind of like tied into a certain sequence that you do, and that's when you pick up the smoke. I have a donut, let me go ahead and grab a coffee, and then after that I'm gonna go and have a smoke. That's the relationship. It's just an automatic thought that enters. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's already become a coping skill or an addiction. We'll get to those. So in this case, the brain only learned a pattern when it comes to the habit. These cases are usually the fastest to resolve when it comes to hypnotherapy. One session sometimes can resolve it, and sometimes it's needed to 2 or 3 or 4. But 1 to 4 is the baseline to do away with the smoking habit at a habit level. Category 2 or level 2 is a smoking coping skill. This is probably the most common. Smoking becomes a way to manage uncomfortable thoughts, emotions, or behavior, but mostly emotions. These examples include stress, frustration, boredom, anxiety, loneliness. The cigarette becomes a temporary emotional regulator. Notice that I said temporary because that distraction will not hold. The distraction to the problem doesn't solve itself, it doesn't solve the cause of the issue, and it doesn't last long. That's what happens with distractions. That's why they're not reliable. That's what happens with distractions. That's why distractions are not reliable. It usually means that once the distraction fades away, then the feeling, the unwanted feeling, comes back. Then after it comes back with a vengeance. It is now stronger. So the creation of the distraction that you implement has to be stronger to create that distraction and continue that distraction. But then the feeling will get stronger. That's the simplest, never-ending cycle that you'll ever see. This is why this coping mechanism or coping strategy is a maladaptive one. It reduces discomfort in the short term, but comes back with a vengeance later and strengthens the dependency on the long term. A typical timeline to deal with maladaptive coping skills, usually 6 to 8 sessions. As clinicians and life coaches, we have to work a little bit harder because we must replace the defense mechanism and the coping mechanism. Category 3, smoking addiction. Addiction is different. This one's different from the other two. It's at a whole different level. Addiction means that the behavior is now controlling the person. This is the hardest issue to coach or therapize. Ask anyone. This is often where we see ego dysregulation. Makes a lot of sense because the loss of control damages the ego, the faith in self. If I can't keep my own promises to myself, then what is my worth? That's usually the association that humans make. If I'm not able to achieve certain victories, then I concentrate on the negatives again and again, which then dismantles regulated ego or confident ego. This is where we see the loss of control, compulsive urges, and emotional instability without the substance. In these cases, we gotta do deeper diving. That way we can explore deeper drivers, trauma, unresolved anxiety, emotional dysregulations, negative beliefs or cognitions, and balance the ego, aka the faith in self. Typical timeline, 8 to 12 sessions. Other people may need more. Regression and progression are a must here. The regression is going back to earlier times that the person felt the detonating feeling, the feeling that keeps triggering the addiction. And the progression stage then is to detach from said trigger emotion. We usually also have to explore secondary gain. Secondary gain is when the benefits are so high that getting rid of the smoking is almost like subconsciously not a complete option at the moment because there's just too much benefits in place. So that's where we do therapies that are focused to dismantle secondary gain. It's like I'm not ready to let go of the addiction because I have this much support or I have people around me rooting for me. That is just one example. The experience that I've had as a clinician that has substance use background, the most common feeling that I see out there when it comes to addictions is anxiety. Anxiety is often the underlying driver. Makes a lot of sense because that feeling of I'm not in control of the present. In other words, lack of self-control. When people feel this lack of self-control, they want something that restores it immediately. Smoking becomes a ritual, a pause, a breathing pattern, a moment of relief. You've probably heard of the serenity principle. This idea appears in many recovery models. The principle is simple. Take control of what you can, let go of what you cannot. We all know that this is easier said than done. Humans are creatures of habit, coping skill, and we're predisposed to addiction, for better or worse, but usually for worse. Cognitive hypnotherapy helps the mind reorganize this relationship with control. The brain learns new responses to stress, new ways to regulate anxiety. Every emotion has a reason to be here. They are like the lights on the dashboard of a car. Give it the wrong response and it exacerbates. Give it the right response and it usually satisfies and then eventually dims away. Cognitive hypnotherapy gives you a natural high of being in the present moment and accessing joy again without needing cigarettes because you naturally have the satisfying solutions to your emotions. And the more you do these patterns, these positive patterns, the stronger you become with repetition. Hypnotherapy is not a magic wand. It is still structured clinical work, cognitions, emotions, and behavior. We work on subconscious triggers, emotional responses, habit loops, identity patterns, and the origin of those patterns. Once those patterns change, the urge to smoke usually dissipates and weakens. If you've tried patches, gum, willpower, and still struggle, it may not be a nicotine problem. It may be a subconscious pattern problem. And that is what cognitive hypnotherapy is designed to address. At the core, my friend. Have you had any issue with smoking? Do you have a friend or a family member with a smoking problem? What worked? What hasn't worked? Leave your comments below. I am always super interested in reading and hearing what you have to say. Until the next video, and thank you for watching.